today we're going to be talking about flipping and pitching cover. So behind me I've got lily pads, and I'm just going to be talking about how to fish this stuff because it can be really productive in the springtime. And a lot of people don't really think like that in the spring. They're looking for fish that are, you know, on those nice sunny days, looking for fish that are cruising around, making beds, spawning. And what happens is you get those nice days and the water warms up, the fish moves up shallow, and starts making those beds or starts roaming around like they were here a little while ago, and you start catching them. You know, I caught a couple on frogs on top water, and then you have these colder days like this that come through, and everyone thinks, oh, the fish aren't up shallow anymore. They think, oh, the fish moved out back to their deep holes. But the truth is that the fish don't want to move from their wintering spots. They're out deep, and so when they move up, when you get a little cold snap like this, or you get some colder weather, they don't like to swim all the way back to their they don't swim all the way back to their wintering spots. They don't swim all the way back out to that deep structure. They just don't want to waste the time or the energy to do it. So what they do is they stay up shallow, but instead of cruising and making beds, looking for beds, they're just going to hunker down in the cover. So right here we got lily pads, and they're not nearly as thick as they are in the summertime. They get a lot more thicker in the summer, but they're, you know, coming up right now, and it's going to be really good because, you know, those bass that are cruising around, what will happen is you get that cold weather, and all they do is they suck in really tight to the bank. They just come and suck up to the bank, and you can get them flipping and pitching. So the gear for this I'm using 7.6. It's actually an extra heavy rod, I believe, or heavy. And you know, for rod, anywhere between stuff like this, I mean, you kind of need specialized gear, but you kind of don't. These pads, like I said, they're not too thick. You could get away with like a medium heavy or a heavy rod with like 20-pound fluorocarbon, but you know, I don't want anything to happen, so I've got the 7.6 extra heavy, and that's typically what I like to use with either 50 to 65-pound braid. Because these aren't as heavy, I feel comfortable fishing the 50. In the summertime, if they're really thick, I'm going to move up to that 65. But for the rod, like in this situation, like I said, you could move down to a smaller rod. You just got to match the cover. You don't want to throw you know, 20-pound fluorocarbon or 15-pound fluorocarbon, you know, and super thick stuff. You just kind of got to, you know, find out where the limit is. If you don't know where it's at, then just go higher. You know, it's always good just to go higher, just to be safe. You know, that way, you know, you don't break off any fish. You don't want to hook a nice fish in this and have them bury you down in there and lose them. So, like I said, there's the combo. It's the rod and reel, or that's the rod. The reel, something fast with a nice drag. This is a 13 Fishing Inception. Actually, I've been fishing this lately, testing it out, and I actually like it a lot. It has a really good, strong drag on it. I think it's like 18 pounds, something like that. So plenty enough drag. Big handles on it, and this is an 8:1-to-1 gear ratio. So when you swing on those fish, you can get them out of those pads, get them out of there quick before they get you hung up. So what you're gonna do, right? So I'm fishing these pads. Is you want something that is going to, that's going to punch through them pads without getting too much, without getting hung up too bad. So this bait right here, use some kind of little thin creature bait. This is this is by Zoom. I think it's a Z-Craw, is what it's called, and it's basically just a real thin body. It's got ribs on it, but a real slim profile, and it's got the little kicking legs on the back. But if you look at that, it's a real slim profile, and you throw a little weight on there. This is just a 3/8 ounce weight, but if you throw a big tungsten weight on there, it's all a slim profile, and it gets in and out of the cover really, really easy. And on there I got a flipping hook. Don't necessarily have to use a flipping hook. You could use a extra wide gap hook if you wanted, just like they make, what are they called? The super line hooks that are just super thick, just thick extra wide gaps. There's a lot of cars going by. Hopefully the audio's not terrible. But basically what you're doing with this is just flipping it out there, or pitching it. A lot of people actually call it flipping, but you know, when you watch them, they're actually pitching. The old, you know, flipping technique, you know, something like that. Right, you're actually controlling the line and flipping in. That actually is what flipping is, the real term of flipping. But when people are fishing this heavy cover, they just call it flipping. So I'm flipping, but I'm actually just pitching my bait out there. But you want to pitch it out there, and lily pads are a little easier to fish than like a thick mat that's covered all the way across. Lily pads have a lot of holes and cracks, and so you can get away with a lot lighter weight. Like I said, I have a 3/8 ounce weight on here, whereas if this was a solid mat, you might want an ounce, maybe an ounce and a half. You need something big. But because those little cracks in lily pads, I can use that little weight and just kind of shake it and get it to fall down into these little cracks. And basically throwing it in there and just kind of lifting the bait up and lift it up to kind of the top of the pads, and then dropping my pole back down. Lifting it up, just kind of shaking it there, and then dropping it back down. So basically just raising up and dropping it down in the same spot. It's really hard to actually work the bait like a normal Texas rig. You can, like in lily pads like this, you can kind of weave your line in and out, kind of work them through. But a lot of times you can't really move the bait towards you as much. It's more just you flip it in one spot and kind of work that spot. So just kind of shake it in that spot. And on a day like this where it's a lot colder, or not a lot colder, but colder, the water cooled down a little bit. Those fish are going to be a little bit more lethargic. They're not going to just want to come over there and smash it, right away. So you can kind of work it slow, pitch it in there, let it sink, hit the bottom, and watch your line as it's sinking, because a lot of times they'll come up, and especially if they're aggressive, as soon as that bait hits the water, they're going to smash it. But if not, like these colder days, pitch it in there, watch the line go down, and then just let it sit on the bottom for a couple seconds. Don't even move it. And then kind of start slowly working it, let it sit, and really give that bait just time to just sit down there, where those fish can, have time to slowly swim over and pick it up. Because they're not going to, if they're not in an aggressive mood, they're not going to just swim over there from all the way across the pads, from one end to the other, and just smash that bait. They're going to, slowly, they may see it slowly moving around, and come over and hit that. Alright, so another thing you want to be doing is you want to make sure that you're covering you're covering the pads correctly, or the vegetation correctly, right? You don't want to be going down the bank and flipping. A lot of times we get just stuck, in this groove of going down doing the same thing, and we're flipping at the same part in the vegetation, right? We're flipping 3 feet away. Say you've got 3 feet of line out, and working the bank 3 feet out all the way down the bank. And what you're doing is you're not covering the whole area, right? So what I would do is kind of sit in one spot and just pick it apart and start in close and slowly work my way out to the edge. And you want to make sure when you get to the edge, you got to make sure that you really fish the edge good, because a lot of times those fish can pull out and be positioned up on those edges, and people don't fish them, especially if I'm in a boat. Do this a lot, like on the bigger lakes if I'm out in the boat, right, and I'm going to fish into a big pad field. I just want to cruise up in there and go up to the bank, right? I turn the trolling motor on high, cruise and cut through all the pads, and a lot of times I don't fish the edge of those pads, but a lot of times those fish will pull out to those edges and be relating to those edges, and you can miss a lot of fish. You can really miss a whole pattern. So one thing you want to look for when you're just fishing a huge field, this is just a stretch of bank, but when you're on a big lake or something, there's just huge fields of pads or vegetation, you kind of want to look for those high percentage areas. You don't want to just go along flipping at every single little part. I mean, you could do it, but it's going to take a lot of time. You want to look for those high percentage areas. And what I mean by that is there's usually something different. You're going along and you're fishing the edge of the lily pad, say, and you've got a point that comes out. Okay, that's something different. You got this point that comes out. There could be fish sitting on that point. Or you've got a log in the water, or you got something like these right here. And it's just something that changes, something different that the fish can hold on. Alright, so a lot of times too what will happen is you'll find an area that will have fish, and usually it will have multiple fish, right? You may be fishing along and come across this one little stick, and you pitch to it and you catch one fish off of it, you know, and that's just kind of random, right? There's just a fish holding on that stick. But you may come across a section where there's a ton of fish. You know, you may come across a part where you see fish blowing up out of the water, or you know, you see these fish, you start just whacking them in this one little area, and usually there's a reason for that, and you can take that reason, find out what that reason is, and take it other places. So for instance, you could be in a spot where you're just catching them, and what could be is the bait. You know, there could be a ton of bluegill or shad or whatever they're feeding on, right? In this lake there's a lot of bluegill, right? So there's a part where there's just a ton of bluegill hanging out, right? So there's a bunch of bass that are eating all those bluegill, and that's the reason why they're there. So you get into a big school of bass that's eating a bunch of bluegill, and then you can kind of go along and be like, okay, you know, let's go try and find another spot with bluegill. A lot of times, it's a little trick here, a lot of times, you can't necessarily do it in the lily pads, but a lot of times when I'm looking for bass, because they're going to be hanging around the bait, they're going to be hanging around bluegill, right? And so what I do is I take my little crappie pole, my little ultralight, put on a little crappie jig or bluegill jig, right? And I go along and fish for bluegill, and you start catching them, right? You get into a little school of bluegill, start hammering them, and then I'll pick up a bass rod and start fishing around that area, because, you know, usually when you find a school like that, there's bass around. So same thing when you're in here, you can kind of find a school, find a little school of bluegill. You could even take a little jig, a little crappie jig, and drop it in between the pads, and you find those little schools, and sometimes there's a lot of bass holding on them. So, I mean, it can be a game, you know, stuff like that. Finding those bait fish can really be a game changer. All right, so one thing you guys just might be able to see me doing is when I'm fishing on the bank as well, and out of a boat, right? You want to take, what I say is you want to take more casts than steps, or more casts than, you know, the boat moves. So what that means is you find an area, right? I'm sitting right here, and you make multiple pitches and cover that area. You find this little, you know, this area in between here and here, and you pitch all over, you cover this area, okay? And then it'll take a couple steps, take 2 or 3 steps, and then cover the next area. 2 or 3 steps, cover the next area. And same thing out of a boat. You know, if you got power poles or whatever, drop your power poles in one area, fish around that area, move a little bit. Fish around this area, move a little bit. You know, also looking for those high percentage areas while you're doing that as well. You know, it just depends how much time you have. If you have a lot of time and you want to just go through picking out every single fish, like I am right now, then that's good. But if you want to if you're in a tournament, or you want, you know, a limited time, you want to just go find the fish, you know, you can turn the trolling motor up and go down and find those high percentage areas, like I said, like bait, or maybe there's a brush pile. This other lake that I fish at, there's actually a big brush pile out in the middle of the pads, and sometimes if you can get on them, there'll be a bunch of big old fish sitting in that brush pile. So stuff like that can really be good. Alright guys, well, I think that's all I've got on flipping and pitching for now. If I think of anything else, I might make another video later, but thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something, hopefully you enjoy. I'm going to get to fishing more. I'm going to fish this stretch of bank and hopefully get a fish, and I'll see you guys in the next video.